Piers Morgan selalu menetapkan standar ganda dalam setiap wawancaranya. Begitu pula dengan Mehdi Hassan yang sekarang diwawancarainya.
It was an act of terrorism and Hamas are terrorists. That's your position.
I think the Hamas fighters who went into Israel and killed civilians and kidnapped babies, certainly I would call them terrorists, just as I call Israeli soldiers who kidnap children and kill children terrorists. I use the terrorist label more freely because otherwise it's just a politicized, empty phrase that we just apply to our enemies. What I would say, Piers, is that I find it a problem, and you know this, you've joked about all the memes about you, this obsession with what we call Hamas, which is a question you pose. Let's be honest, Piers, to most of your pro-Palestinian brown guests. You don't ask your Israeli or Jewish or pro-Israeli guests to condemn Israeli terrorism or Israeli war crimes at the start of an interview in the way you do.
Well, no, I've been asked
pro-Palestinians.
directly whether I think Israel are terrorists, and I've said no. I don't think they are. I think they had a right to defend themselves. The question is the scale.
That wasn't the point I made, Piers.
That
wasn't the point I made. I said when you have Israeli guests on. Let me finish my sentence. Let me finish my sentence.
No, Mehdi, it's not your show. It's mine. I wanted to say that, or the whole interview, by the way. So we got that out of the way. That's a joke. I'm joking. But the point I would make is, I think that I asked all the pro-Palestinian guests who've come on that question quite quickly, because I think it reveals a state of mind. If, like you, and I'm sorry, I didn't realise you had in that first piece on MSNBC done that. So I take back the suggestion you hadn't, and I'm glad that you have called them that. I don't think you can call them anything else. So the moment you have a pro-Palestinian guest who wants to avoid calling what Hamas did an act of terrorism by terrorists, I think it's very revealing about their mindset, and I think it's the wrong mindset.
Here's my problem with that. Why is that not applied to your Israeli guests? I would be fine, Piers, if you had Palestinian guests and you begin by asking them, do you condemn Hamas war crimes? Because what Hamas did on October 7th was a war crime. But then you should start with Israeli guests and pro-Israeli guests saying, do you condemn Israeli war crimes, which have been documented by the UN, every human rights group on the planet? You don't. You had Naftali Bennett, the former Israeli Prime Minister, on a couple of weeks ago. I watched the interview. Your opening question was, how comfortable are you with the way Israel's prosecuting the war? Right. Bit of a softball to start with. You didn't ask him to condemn Israeli terrorism, Israeli war crimes, Israeli genocide in Gaza. So a lot of people look at that and they say, they get your intention, but it comes across as a bit of a racist double.
You asked me, do you think Israel are terrorists? And I've said no. I don't think they are, but I have repeated.
Why?
Well, I have repeated
Why?
Because I think they.
Out of interest, why?
Because they were responding to an act of terrorism so heinous it demanded a massive military response. The question for me that's caused me a moral quandary is what is an acceptably proportionate level of response, and I don't know the answer. But I don't think you can call people responding to an act of terror on that scale terrorists for responding. What you can do is hold them to account.
The problem, Piers, is if you go to Gaza, Piers, and you talk to Palestinians, they will say that Hamas were responding. If we play the who started it game, we go back many decades.
Well, when did Israel kill?
What we need to have is.
Well, hang on. When did Israel kill 1,200
When did Israel kill
Palestinians?
Hundreds of Palestinian civilians?
When did they kill 800 Palestinian civilians in one few hour period? Right, in the way that Hamas killed those Israelis.
But that's not the definition of terrorism, how many hours you do it in. I can mention many Israeli massacres going back to Sabra and Shatila, which they oversaw, going back to Kibbutz and Ariel Sharon, going back to Deir Yassin, where rape and violence happened. The point is not to compare atrocities. The point, Piers, is to have a consistent moral principle, which is to say, if you kill civilians for a political cause, you are a terrorist. On that basis, Hamas have committed acts of terror and Israel have committed acts of terror. I think that's only fair to say that.
Yeah, listen, you're perfectly entitled.